I'll just deal with an administrative matter. That's it now in hand. I believe our next submitter is Northland Federated Farmers. Mr. Colin Hannah.
That's me, sir.
Good morning, sir. Please have a seat, and we'll hand it over to you. Do you have anything to distribute to us, or are you going to? Okay, we'll come over and assist you.
Or just swap everyone between to go over here. Sorry.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to come along and present to you. And thank you to the council staff for working with us and our legal team to come to I think, fairly successful situation that we're in. However, there are some issues that have arisen since, and we may have had some other issues and take things further had we had those at hand at the time. So I acknowledge the work that Joanne has done working with you, and thank you. I'd like to, there was a comment made at the World Agri-Tech Future Food Summit in San Francisco, which I think will have a bearing on this morning. Farmers have freed the rest of society to pursue their dreams, rather than having to feed their families. Yet most farmers lack sustainable profitability, and that's a fairly major point, particularly here in Northland. Okay. So for those of you who may be unaware, our Northland costs in internal operating is about 7% higher than the national inflation. That hasn't seemed to go away. One of the questions that we do have in terms of, and this is more direct probably to the staff, we would like to see a statement in the overview of the chapter to set out what council's intention is. This is around the overlays in terms of section 42A of the report. So we'd like to see that at some stage. Sir, thank you. Following on from where we got to in terms of the overlays and the impact they're having on people who are resident in the area. Humans have emotions, and they're tied up with their land, and we need to think about that. And I've just given you today the graphs. I've been doing a body of work around what Northland's emission profiles are. And one of the things that has struck me most is that we've seen a decrease in dairy cow numbers of 20% since 2017. We have seen a 19% decrease in beef numbers. And this is what actually shocked me, because I actually expected with the decrease in dairy that would be replaced by beef, but it hasn't happened. Now that will flow through into the Northland economy, and as most of you, any of you who've listened to me before, my focus is on the well-being of Northland and its residents. Given this information that we're starting to see, one of the works in Northland might have to close. Think about that. And so we need to be encouraging farmers to be able to do things and change. Now, on that graph that I just presented to you, that's representing land use change. Right. The reasons behind those reductions in animal numbers will be, some will be old age for people like me, but others will be just the burden of regulation, both from local body and from government. So I brought up, twice this year, I brought up to Northland, the number one thinker in government, to try and let our planners, because these people do a good job, and we do need regulation to control society, we do need it, but not to the extent that we are seeing at the present time. It's becoming almost impossible. And you look at the pages and pages of documents that we farmers have to read through to, are we breaking the law? Now, in terms of the overlay which we've got at Pakaraka, and the 55 centimetres. I think I would have pushed back on that had I known a bit more about it earlier, but on any farm, you're going to lose animals from time to time. We don't like to, but it happens. And I'll tell you what, a pit bull's going to leave a lot of stink at 55 centimetres. Fact. And so a farmer has to be able to bury his animals as required by law. So you don't end up with conflict. And so the stresses, going back to the overlay, I've had a chat with a number of experts in that area. And as a farmer, and an arable farmer, I would go make a statement that on clay soils, it's very hard to do. And I would anticipate that our ancestors didn't bother too much with the clay soil. But since we've had modern equipment, probably for 6 generations, those soils in that area have been cultivated. And any heritage items certainly would have probably surfaced by now. So ploughs, discs, rippers, all of those implements would have been used on that land. And it would be my view at this point in time that the overlay that existed by law should stay. And I would question the other bit should be related back to soils. Okay. And farmers have to live. I go back to allow all the rest of you to pursue your dreams because you wouldn't have any food at the table. So I just want to remind you that decisions that you make impact other humans. And we're all emotional beings. I challenge you to think about it today. So I'm hoping, I think we've covered most of it in our our response. But I am open to talk to you more further if you require. Any questions?
No, thank you very much. So a very short and direct submission.
Absolutely,
as always. So thank you. Thank you for that. You referenced the soil depth issue.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we've received quite a bit of evidence about that. So you guys suggesting that do you have an issue with the method of restricting excavation or managing excavations using depth of digging? Do you have an issue with that method, or is it just the depth that it enables?
For example, just let's talk about that, because if I was to put a fence in, for example, the strainer faces are going to have to go down 1.8 metres. Okay. Now, if I dig, and in northern soils, to be frank with you, I mean, I came originally from the Waitangi, right? It's 10 times harder to farm up here than it is down there. And if I thumped the post and it didn't usually move up here, I'm constantly having to pull them out and dig them out, put them so that they don't move when you put the strain on them. That's to do with soil types. So you know, 1.2, and burying an animal, you would just about have to go down to that to get a cover, and so you're not offending your neighbours or anybody else for that matter.
The traditional way to control excavations, particularly when you've got some heritage resources potentially at stake, is to control the area,
yep,
and or the volume. And so the council officers have prepared these reports and taken on a lot of initially reasonably innovative approach. It says what's at stake here. The issue is undiscovered archaeological resources. Let's control the activity by depth and not focus on area and volume. So what I'm interested in is that the right approach to deal with heritage resources, and is the issue a matter of depth or exceptions for certain types of activities with regards to depth? I'm just trying to see whether there is merit in your eyes on this method being the further approach.
It would, my view at this point would be via soil type, because if you've got people who've traditionally had gardens and they will have chosen the easiest method to dig and to grow, and so the artefacts that you're likely to be looking for will be where they have been most. So highly unlikely to be found on the soils, because I do know from one of the people on the Chalice report that when they dug down on the clay soil, they found zero.
So you're saying, I'm trying to see how that might translate into a workable standard. Well, you're saying that, so essentially are you sort of saying, well, where you have clay soils, the depth might be X, but where you have other soil, it might be Y.
Well, farmers in that area are working on that now. I mean, it was with the existing layer, right?
But then that adds a whole sort of, that potentially, I mean, I don't want to start throwing obstacles, but that potentially, then the pressure point would be, how do you determine what sort of soil, and who determines what sort of soil you have?
Well, it's pretty well, the soils types in around Northland are fairly well designated, but it's difficult. For example, on my property, I've got 7 different soil types I've had to wrestle with almost every day. Some are, almost impermeable, and others let's go through. So, farmers have a difficult job as it is in Northland, just to farm.
Okay, so if I were to summarise what you're saying is, federated farmers don't have an objection to the principle of managing potential heritage resources by way of STEM. You just want to introduce a soil type criteria to how deep you go.
I think that would make it, for a farmer, I think that might make it easier, because these farmers are working with an overlay now, right? It's the extension that is causing the problem.
Okay. Good. No, thank you. That's been helpful. I'll just set the other, and I've seen your other changes in your evidence. So we recognise that, and the council officers will respond to your evidence and their right of reply as is the usual fashion. So that'll be yet to come. I'll see if the other commissioners have any questions for us.
Hilda, I just wanted to ask your opinion about, do you feel there are enough protections already over farming lands?
That's my opinion. I mean, the people that I've been working with up here are all pretty credible. They find something, they contact the heritage people to come and have a look. I mean, we're all interested in the park. That's true.
But that's really what I want to know. Did you feel that there's a need for another one?
No.
Then I agree. Hilda.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hanno. I've just got one question of clarification from the evidence of Ms. Cook-Munro. And your mention this morning about changes to the overview or adding sentences into the overview of each of the chapters. Ms. Munro's evidence to us clearly sets out what could go into one of the chapters, but not all of them. Is that information in your original submission, setting out what that wording?
It should be.
Okay, so
if it's not, I'll take that matter up with Joseph away, probably, but I'll take it up with Jesse.
It's not to be clear exactly what the wording is that you want to put into each of the overviews.
I'll have a look.
Right.
I can confirm that they've asked for a specific wording. The wording is in their original submission as to what that overview wording is.
Okay, so you're clear on that. Okay, that's good. Just wanted to make sure everyone was on the right page. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you again for your, sorry, we've got a question of clarification from the reporting panel, Ms. Pearson.
I was able to ask, I was picking up because the witness was talking about Pakaraka, and it sounded like a lot of the information being talked about was relating to the Purua heritage area overlay specifically. And I just wanted to clarify, is the only concern with Purua, or is this a wider concern with the other heritage area overlays, and for the context of the panel, the others that are of a rural type nature, Te Waimati and Rangitoa?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question, so I'll allow it.
And to address that, whilst we have specifically look at the Waitangi situation, it's over the whole of the farmers district that we're looking at in terms of that. That's our opinion.
Any follow-up?
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we're making good progress. Mr. Riddell, good morning, welcome back.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Riddell, we've received and read your evidence, very thorough, as always. We'd be happy for you to give us a summary of it, or just raise any other matters that you wish to bring to our attention.
Just make some quick outline of what the evidence covers.
Yes.
The rest of all, kia ora. So that the main thrust of this evidence is to compare the existing provisions that apply to Kororaraka with what is in the proposed plan at the moment. The existing provisions have essentially, putting to one side the commercial bit of zoning which applies around the Wharf, the Strand and York Street. It has a residential Russell Township zone applying across the whole of the residential area. It has 3 heritage precincts, which are parts A, B and C of the Kororaraka Russell Heritage Overlay Area. And it has between those, or it also has a buffer area, a buffer and entrance area around the heritage precincts, which is part D. Under the current district plan, there are more going in order of stringency of more stringent rules. You start out with the Russell Township, then there's a more stringent in the buffer area, and then more stringent again in the heritage precincts, or the parts A, B, and C. Under the proposed plan at the moment, it's more stringent in the buffer area because the rules that apply in parts A, B, and C also now apply in Part D. They didn't before, and it's more stringent in the area that's outside of the heritage overlay because the floor area ratio rule applies across the whole board, whereas previously it was a 2-part floor area ratio rule. 20% of the net floor area, which is all the floor area buildings within the area covered by the Kororaraka Russell Heritage Overlay Area, and there was a floor area ratio applied to the ground floor outside of that. The effect of the staff recommendations at the moment would be that floor area ratio will change to the ground to applying to the ground floor over the Russell residential area and in the historic overlay. So what my evidence is doing is saying that let's just amend the floor area ratio rule, and I'll put the wording in there in a way that makes it a hell of a lot less, removes the ambiguity that may be in the existing rule, but covers it, and also that in the heritage overlay rules to transfer the built form in Part D into the permitted activity, so that it actually then replicates what's in the existing plan. And just remind you that the existing plan schema for Kororaraka came about as a result of an Environment Court decision which was attached to my evidence.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, you know, I've read your evidence regarding this floor area ratio issue. So, the thrust of your evidence is to ensure that smaller sites have a workable floor area for a dwelling. So, in particular, I think you're focusing on sites less than 400 square metres, is that correct? So, the implication of that would be that I think with the rule you're proposing, it would be that any dwelling, regardless, any site less than 400 square metres would be able to have an 80 square metre dwelling, regardless of those sites. I'm just sort of wondering, have you done the analysis? Do you know how many sites we may be dealing with? Is there a number? I'm sort of thinking, well, what is the sort of the scale implications of adopting that rule, and how many? I don't expect you to count every single one, but I'm just sort of wanting to get a flavour of the spatial spread of those numbers. Yeah.
I might have it with some information I've got in here.
And if council officers have that answer, you know, I'll be happy for you to supply it to
I'll
us.
just quickly check.
Yes, by all means. I mean, it has a sort of like, you know, a basic practicality to it, and I've seen similar rules in other district plans, particularly in sort of heritage areas where smaller sites tend to occur.
I don't think it's many. I've got there are a number of sections that could be subdivided down to 800 square metres. So the only one smaller than that would be pre-existing and probably built on already.
Yeah, so I'm assuming there are existing sites and that you wouldn't be able to subdivide down to it, but
Most
happy to be corrected there.
Yeah, I'd say that very few, if any, at 400 square metres which haven't been built on.
And for those sites that are under 400 and have a dwelling already on it, can you give us a flavour of the size of those dwellings? Are they around 80 square metres?
I couldn't tell you that.
No.
But I would say that the architectural analysis from the 1988 planning report was that overwhelmingly we have small scale buildings. And walking around Russell regularly every morning as I do, and there are not a lot of what I would describe as large buildings. They're mostly modest cottage size.
Yeah. With 80 square metres, you could get a modest 3-bedroom house out of that. But do you have any opinion on that?
It'd be cosy.
Modest.
But cosy, but probably when you think about it, in the 1950s, it would have been a 3-bedroom house. Sort of what, 80.
Thank you, that's helpful. I'll see if the other commissioners have any questions on this particular matter.
Hilda, I just wanted to ask, do you feel these sufficient protection overlays already over Kororareka or heritage sites?
I noticed that the what they call now, Heritage New Zealand has put in a submission seeking to extend the buffer area, and I agree with that, although I didn't put in a submission agreement. And the other notable area is the Marae site up by the cemetery, and that's already covered by a reserve.
Sorry, what?
That's already covered by a reserve. It's already identified as a reserve, a reserve. So I think that yeah, that the with the buffer area, with the Part D, and that I think that's sufficient, coupled with the archaeological protection, because there have been issues with people trying to develop car sites up on the particularly along Russell Lake Road. And they seem to come to a screaming halt.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Riddell. I just, on the building scale matter, is there a link between that and the wastewater infrastructure issue, or are they separate? Is the building scale more to do with?
The building scale is about the retaining the small scale and feel of the town.
Yeah.
The subdivision lot size is absolutely tied to the wastewater scheme.
Okay.
And as you might not know, but the Kororaraka wastewater scheme is to deep bores and has so there's no discharge to the harbour or anything like that, direct discharge after treatment. So, but that limits the capacity, and the whole area of the scheme is the zone, Russell Township plus commercial area, and that when that's fully developed, I think my calculation from back when we had the plan change to change the subdivision lot sizes is that that's the wastewater scheme will be over capacity, just based on, using the numbers that the engineers use about, we have this number of people in the house at this time, this amount of volume of water per person equals how much we're going to be treating.
Yeah.
It's a maximum calculation.
Oh, thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, thank you all. We'll allow you to go back to your summary. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. I finished it.
Oh, you finished?
I
Okay.
finished my summary.
Okay, well, I think it's probably one, maybe two questions more. Your paragraph 61, you talk about, I'll let you get there. You talk about design guidelines.
Yeah.
And I'm just interested on how that method would work. And in particularly, do you think it's appropriate for district plans to have a non-statutory guideline in them? And once they're in the plan, they're sort of trapped in time. And there's that question of design guidelines. Well, they're supposed to be a guideline, but the moment they appear in a plan, they sort of take on the form of a rule. And also, too, is how do you update your guidelines without having to update your plan?
Yep. Okay. So the first thing is that design guidelines have essentially been in the district plan for the last two iterations.
Yes.
Post the.
And they've been updated?
They were updated with after the appeal. In terms of, sorry, the transitional district plan had design guidelines, essentially in forms of a policy. Development should be like. They then became evolved into the operative district plan through particularly policy 10948, which I quote paragraph 64. And in conjunction with that, and I think as part of the agreement with the council over the appeal, the council were going to get a more descriptive set of design guidelines prepared, which is Appendix 4 of my evidence, which was prepared by Jeremy Summer. And the content of that, and there was also much more design guideline put into for the buffer zone into the assessment criteria. Now, the assessment criteria stuff, which is design related, is now proposed to be in that policy 6.
Yeah, because
And I think the important point about policies is that policies are not mandatory, and they're actually taken into account, I think, as the starting word of that particular policy. So yes, they should be in there. What I've done is later in my evidence, 72, is actually taken the assessment criteria and linked them across to what's proposed for policy 6, and then commented on two aspects, commented at 73, identified two aspects from the other design guidelines that have not been covered well in that policy. And I think they should be. And I think it's misrepresenting it to say that they are mandatory. They're guidelines in the policy.
Yes, I mean, that's interesting because when you look at the structure of the Resource Management Act, you're not required to have assessment criteria in a plan. It's something that you can do optionally. And this proposed plan doesn't actually have section assessment criteria, but it must have matters of discretion. But that's a different thing to assessment criteria. So I think what you've been putting to us is if you want to use assessment criteria, you have to adapt them into policies. Is that a summary of structure of the two? Because the ODP, had assessment criteria, the whole section on assessment criteria. The PDP, has matters of discretion, but not assessment criteria. But there are policies that sort of have this, look like they have assessment criteria in them, but without stating that they are assessment criteria. Is that how you're seeking to work them into the plan?
Yeah, I think you've got to remember that there's two levels here. There's the first level is if you want a permitted activity, here's your bulk and location and floor area ratio rules. Meet that, and there's probably not going to be a concern. You want to go beyond that or outside that, well, then we're thinking that there may be a concern in terms of how are you going to demonstrate this application is in line with the policy intent of retaining the character of the town. And for a lot of people, that the design guidelines really a help. I mean, they should be in the policy to indicate to everybody.
But the plan has its appendices, right? So, and there are guidelines already in the appendices. I think it's Appendix 5 is the NAFA Enterprise Zone design guidelines. Would that be, if we were minded to recommend the inclusion of design guidelines, would that be an appropriate place to put it?
That would be an alternate place, yeah.
Yeah.
Personally, I would, while we still have the structure of the Resource Management Act and non-compliant activities, I'm always keen on more in the policies and assessment criteria or so forth, because that threshold test doesn't apply.
I mean, I don't really
threshold assessment criteria, but that's by the way.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, council officers, but those appendices are non-statutory. They're there to help you. So that would be that would be the option if we were to include guidelines as a non-statutory guide.
Yeah.
If you wanted it to be something that you had to take into consideration with regards to preparing and assessing resource consent, then your method is to include it within the policies.
And ensure that the matters of discretion.
Yeah, and then have a link to the matters of discretion.
But I suppose because what's proposed in policy 6 is only a summary of that appendix, the guideline that I've attached to appendix 4 as my evidence. One possibility, one thing that could be considered would be to let's pick up the 2 points I make about new buildings into policy 6 and then just have a note at the bottom, just say more assistance may be found if you refer to this council document.
Yes. Yes. Now, yesterday we...
I'd just say that one of the things that I'm concerned about is, in my experience, that the guidelines existed, but I don't think the council processing planners were aware of it, applicants weren't aware of it, and decision makers weren't aware of it. So it was sort of...
Okay. Yesterday, if my memory serves me correctly, Mr. Brown, you made some comments about those guidelines. Would you? Would you like to repeat what you were saying? Can you hear me?
So the ones that 2007 ones that Mr. Riddell was presented in his scheduling, this is appendix 4, I think. So one aspect in terms of a general conservation process is that we would like to generally review guidelines on a relatively regular basis, and that would be about every 5 years or maybe 10 years at the maximum. The reason for that is that those methods and ways of doing things can change, and they can change quite quickly over time. Technologies come as well. So, for example, pen technology is an example. The issue that the council's faced with is, as I understand it, is if you embed a reference to a particular document at a particular time, that document becomes a statutory article in the plan, and then it becomes, you need a plan change to then update the document. Whereas if it remains non-statutory, you can update those design guidelines in line with current conservation. So that's the balance.
That's the dilemma, really.
I suppose the question then would be that if you put in a statement, just a note that there are more detailed guidelines available. If it used something like the most recent version of new guidelines that are available, you would overcome that.
Yes, I suppose an E-plan could have a link to a non-statutory guideline.
I suppose the parallel is that with a resource consent and the consent conditions, quite often there's notes which are not possible resource consent conditions, and that's what I'm thinking, that something akin to that in a district plan.
Yes, and I think one of the matters I think of raising your evidence is the trigger link to a consent officer and an applicant that these things exist, and reminding them at the appropriate time to have regard to them.
Yeah.
And that's where there's a little bit of tension about the rigidity of a planning instrument and Mr. Brown's evidence, which says guidelines need to be regularly updated. I suppose that's what we're sort of wrestling with at the moment. Anything more to say, Mr. Brown, on that matter while we have your ear?
Another way of doing that might be internally through council training processes, so that, for instance, consent officers are made aware of those kind of things and they want to applicants with the application process.
Okay, no, thank you. I'll hold most of the questioning. I'll just go see the panel if they have any other questions.
No, all my questions have been answered. Thank you. That's been very useful.
Well, thanks again, Mr. Riddell. Your evidence is comprehensive, and we see you at almost every hearing. So thank you again for your commitment to improving the plan as an instrument. And we look forward to seeing you again at some further hearings, I'm sure.
I didn't make a submission about it, but I was interested in your comment about asking about depth of estimates.
Oh, yes.
And I noticed that in Russell, in Colorado, it's 500 millimetres, and looked at that and thought, I have to bury my electric cables to 600 millimetres.
Well, I'm sure you'll have many supporters immediately behind you on that. Well, thank you very much again. Okay, Mr. Bracey. Okay, have you got some material you want distributed?
No.
Nice, or just...
Yeah.
Oh, you've got a presentation. I'm sure. Oh, and you're going to make that available to us?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's on the website.
It's on the website
Yeah.
now?
Now we have had troubles with this clicker. I can give it to you and hopefully it'll work today, and if not, I can do it for you. Just pointed at my computer and it's that one there. Well, yeah.
I'm going to say. So Bill is the regional manager up here, and he will introduce us. So.
Again, that go, Jack. I'd just like to welcome everybody and say thank you very much to the commissioners. Thank you also to the council officers, and also thank you to the audience here, and also to our virtual people there. Kia ora. So, my name is Bill Edwards. I'm an area manager for Northland Community Tonga. I live up here, and I'm an archaeologist by training. And I'll introduce my colleague, Diana. How do you want to stand up?
Kia ora tātou, ko Watareia Hei Te Kuingoa. I'm the Senior Māori Heritage Advisor, Tai Topere, for Pauere Tonga. Kia ora.
And kia ora, I'm Stuart Bracey. I'm a heritage planner for the Northern region, so it's Auckland up, for Heritage New Zealand. And I was working out between the two of us, we have over 100 years of experience. So if you dig too deeply, you'll need an authority. What we would like to do is go through, with Bill leading this presentation, and we would welcome questions as we go along, because some of the issues, things will jump to mind straight away. And we'd rather have that discussion included with the staff if we can as we go along. That would make it flow better, we think.
So the idea really is a visual conversation. Okay. So we've introduced ourselves. This is an outline of what we're planning to do: protection of dry stone walls, extensions to the heritage overlays areas. They're listed there. Heritage areas, use of arcsite information, and the Waitangi special purpose zone. So Northland is very important, and the reason is that our heritage is of value. It connects us to the past, it fosters a sense of community, and also provides opportunities for tourism and economic growth. So it's that sense of belonging to a place, but Northland really is a place of beginnings for all sorts of reasons, and we'll talk about some things as we go through. We're looking at stone walls, but what we're also looking at is not just the walls, we're looking at Māori horticultural fields, stone fields. Stone is a tangible asset. It's easily used, it can be stacked, and it can be moved. And what happens is that these stacking of stones and moving of stones, whether they're for Māori horticulture or for European pastoral farming, they're visual markers to how a landscape's been used in the past. And so when we destroy these visual markers, what happens is the landscape becomes denuded in a sense of this visual representation. So we're really keen to look after these.
I'll just jump in there and let you know what I'll ask the council officers to do is with immediate definition of dry stone. You call stone walls some
Dry stone.
Dry stone. Yeah, and whether the plan needs to define what one is. I think there is an assumption. I think the assumption is that it is a wall built of natural stone that doesn't have water or cement. But of course, there are lots of people running around building dry stone walls that have both of those things. And I'm just wondering whether we need to clarify what exactly it is that we're talking about. And of course, the other thing too is that we call it a wall, but often it's a fence. It's really acts as a rail on a fence. It's not a wall as in the sense that it's part of a building. It is like a natural landscape fencing structure in it. Wondering whether that just needs to be clarified so that everybody who uses this instrument understands what it is that it is. So have a think about that and whether you think that might be.
So we've actually got some clarifications on this book here that might be useful.
Okay, thank you.
And also the Whaitangi District Council operative plan has a definition for their rules as well. So, and that's included in the appendix to my evidence.
Okay. Oh, okay. So you've already gone in. Yeah. Well, thank you. That'll be very helpful. Oh, sorry. Ms. Pearson.
So if it's helpful to the panel just to inform the discussion you're about to hear,
yes.
That whangārei definition that's in Mr. Bracey's evidence
yes.
does talk about what you were talking about, constructed by hand without mortar from locally sourced volcanic rocks. Yeah. The whangārei definition mentions specific locations. So it mentions Matauri, Manu, Kiwiri. So it includes specific locations. but it is not particularly specific with regards to dates. So the definition says these walls were generally constructed between the 1850s and World War II. Pre-1900 dry stone walls are also classified as archaeological sites. So that is their plan definition. So when we are discussing the Whangarei example, that's the definition that the Whangarei example hangs from.
Right. Okay. Well, that's sort of help. That gives us something to work with. Thank you.
So here's some local examples of stone walls and the dry stone walls and stones have been stacked.
The point we want to also make is with the Rua overlay, both those examples are outside of that area. So the overlay does not include all of the stone walls that we're talking about.
What area, sorry, did you say?
Pardon?
What area did you say?
The Poreta overlay,
Oh,
yeah, that is not, those two pictures were not from that area. So there are a number of the examples of this outside of that overlay area. Which is why we're asking for a general protection, not just restricted to that area, that overlay.
And here's an example, for instance, in the Kirikiri in there. This is Edmund's Ruins, where we recently had a stone conservation course where we taught people how to conserve stone walls. So here you can see that's the stone wall there that set up his lines and gauges so that we can follow. And we built 18 metres of stone wall as a training exercise. And that's the finished result. You can see there's Edmund's Ruins in the back there, and here we have a wall running that was constructed by the students, and there we produced the games. So stone walls are in a sense of plastic state, but they're really important. There's an example of some of the Stonefield sites that are around here. We've got a much better diagram for you in this book.
What we want to make with this is that they are obviously related to our volcanic activity, and it's that activity through that area, that band across there, not just that overlay area.
And may I add too that those, with our friend here from Federated Farmers was talking about soils. These areas here are volcanic soils, and they were heavily used for horticulture by Māori. So you have the reuse of stones, and sometimes you have these intact stone field systems. So these are really good indicators of where people would live and where archaeological sites are in the landscape. Because you saw this.
Any questions on that part at this stage? Okay.
That's pretty clear, thank you.
I guess we're looking at extensions to Kotararika Russell Heritage Overlay areas. And the point of this picture that was done in 1835 is to show that it really was a Māori world, and there was a little smuggling of Pākehās there. And you can see all the trading that's going on there. You can see all the wakas built up there. And this has got a point on it. Let's see. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go, there's the church. This is what is now known as this area here is house along here. It's Heyday, and the Mikey's up here.
I think you're going to the wrong direction.
Yeah, oh, here we go. Good. It's interesting with this recent debate on Kotararika, the British actually called Russell Kotararika the day before the battle, so there you go. That hasn't been missed. But there's some interesting features of this drawing, and this really explains why the area as a whole should be included. Here we can see the flagpole, Maiki here. We can see the Anglican church here. We can see what is known as Turner's Row, which is now become Portmelia. And here we can see the stockade here, which blew up. And up here is the Catholic Church. So if we just zoom in a bit, This is sitting on top of the hill. This is where the flagpole is, and this is the fortification that was used. It was basically a transportable stockade that was built up on top. That was placed there to protect the flagpole. This is, of course, the famous picture of cutting down a flagpole. It's wrong for a number of reasons. First of all, it was sort of dug up, was sort of undermined, and it had a metal sleeve up there. But the other thing is, if you look at the flag, you can see the haki, the Union Jack coming down here. But actually, on the day, this drawing was done 70 years after the event. And when you look at what actually happened, this is the blow-up of the day before the event. You can see that actually there's a flag on top above the Union Jack. That's actually the Royal Navy flag. So there's some interesting stuff going on there. And this is why we think we should be talking about this area that includes Maiki, the hill, because that really was, in a sense, it set off the Northern Wars, it set off a number of battles that happened in the north, Rutekapeka and the Highway and other places. And it really also meant that the wealth was moved away, the capital was set up, and a lot of things happened as a result of this.
Excuse me, Mr. Edwards, you referred to that as
Maiki, the hill.
Can you spell it?
M-A-I-K-I.
So we went through this final extension with Melissa and John, and this is what we agree is appropriate for what we can do now. So we support this extension now.
Yeah. And the reason being is because of the importance of that place, the importance of FNDC. I'm going to pass this on to my colleague because his father was born there.
Getting to Rowing, so yes, I have to put up my hand with the conflict. My dad was born there, my uncles were born there, and Dad spent some of his last days there at that hospital. So yeah, I'm very familiar with the site. What we're trying to do with the heritage extension or addition, if you like to call it that, in Rowan, is show that the hospital site has a long and important history in the social life of that community, with both the Free Health Act that was passed just for the Hookgang area, based here, and we're not concerned about the buildings. We're concerned about remembering that that site has tangible or intangible value for its history in the health system of the Hookgang. Now, we also have added in the cemetery because we're firmly of the belief if the cemetery was down in area A or B of Rowing now, it would be included. And in that historic area, in that cemetery, it's obviously got generations of very important people to that area and to the wider area, both European and Māori. So again, we're not asking for any particular restriction on it, but we want to acknowledge if you're putting in historic overlays over Rowing, that these are essential to remembering the historic history of Rowing. So there are no restrictions that we're placing on hospital use of the buildings or anything like that. It's an acknowledgement. There are no listed buildings there.
That shows the map of the area, that extension there around the hospital and the cemetery. The next one is the proposed extension to the Waitangi heritage area. I guess we can put this photograph here.
One moment, Mr. Edwards. I mean, you said you have to take questions,
Yeah.
so I've got a question being requested to me from the council officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would appreciate some clarification with respect to what's been sought for Rawani. I'm clear that they're not looking for particular rules or restrictions on that site, but it's an acknowledgement. And I just want to clarify which tool they think is the correct one for that, given that a heritage area overlay, the purpose of it is to introduce some particular rules or restrictions. So I just wanted to clarify Heritage New Zealand seeking an overlay for the site, or is this falling into the category of the alert areas, which they're bringing up for some of other areas in the plan?
Yes, good question.
I think if we've got the overlays, it should be part of it, through Rowan, it should be part of the overlay, and it certainly can say we're suggesting area C that the rules don't apply. And that in describing area C, you could list this is the intangible values that we want recognised or remembered or acknowledged or respected.
So to understand that, an extension of the overlay, but to clarify that the rules don't apply to.
And for this particular part of it, there's A, B, and C. So for area C,
and that, Councillor, can that be done?
Alternatively, we could come back to the old layout.
This will be a non-statutory alert.
Correct, which we can discuss more.
And that begs questions as to what instrument you use to flag that. Because soon could have a non-statutory layer on the district. Does the district plan have non-statutory layers?
It's the GIS statutory layer, but it's an area C identified on the plan. It is a statutory layer, just without rules.
Yeah, so that's an okay method.
Might have to have a.
That's another question, right?
I think my initial response to that as a solution is that putting a consent planner hat on for 5 years down the track who's not in this room, what will they take away from an overlay with policy direction about acknowledging heritage? What do they do with that if there is a consent application from the hospital in the hospital zone? What is that policy direction telling them to do? And that's where my uncertainty lies about putting a policy framework in place without any rules to explain what direction, what action a consenting planner should do when they don't have the benefit of this discussion.
Because obviously, if you want to recognise it's important as a health system on a particular place, as you described, if you then say, I don't want any rules to apply to it, it sort of becomes a little bit tautological because it has some value as that health centre that, so there's obviously something tangible that should be considered. And I think you raised a good question there, Ms. Pearson, about what does a consent planner do? And reconciling those sort of, a bit of really competing outcomes.
I guess the hospital zone was heard quite a few hearings ago.
Yes.
And the driver for the hospital zone being a special purpose zone for hospitals is to be enabling, to allow, and we've heard from Health New Zealand in a number of different hearings. I wasn't at the hospital zone hearing, but I heard from Health New Zealand at the rural hearings about how important it is to not put roadblocks in place, particularly South Kianga is an area that is a long way away from the other hospitals. It's not run by Health New Zealand, it is a private hospital, and it's really the only healthcare facility for people in the South Kianga. So I've got that element to consider as well.
I suppose we're trying to introduce a similar concept to Māori's areas of significance where there's intangible values. And I would expect a planner to be able to recognise and see whether the intangible values have been respected for any application for that site. Because this site could be sold. It's a private site now, it could be sold. It could be made a hotel.
The intangible value, it seems to me, is that it was a health care.
No, a particular type that was only done in this part of New Zealand.
That was the first or important healthcare provider at an important time. That's the intangible value. And somebody comes along and buys the site and tries to turn it into a hotel, and doesn't that affect its intangible value?
But I would expect the planner to say, how are you recognising that intangible value? What are you doing in your redevelopment of that site? Are you putting up storyboards? What are you recognising the intention? How are you doing it?
The question is it done through, you saying it doesn't necessarily need to happen through rules, it just needs to be recognise that this
There needs to be an
thing is here
awareness.
for this purpose. Okay, let's. Any follow-up questions?
No, that's,
I suppose.
While we're here, Commissioners, any other questions
Yeah.
from you?
I suppose he pātai kia koe ahi te reiria. He kōrero i wainganinga hapu o reira o Ngāti Hau nā ōwhanaunga. E pāna ki tēnei, ka whakai rātou, kia noho tēnei I raro I te maru o Heritage New Zealand.
Specifically, well, I'll wind it back. My daughter is a registered nurse at Waitangi Hospital, and she did her training at Rawani. And when they taimana, the kaupapa there, and as soon as he found out my connection with whakapapa there, he said, oh good, we've got it, we have an interest in here and what happens to it. And then I suppose that those things get bogged down with rules and policies and budgets and whatever. So I haven't gone back to him in terms of this to specifically get their view, but he socialised that view to me when we took it. Yeah, that it's a place of importance to all the families, to the hapu, to the arawa, which is
It's a real essential service. I suppose why I'm raising that is that in council we know that there's tension over, some of the reserves in Rawini that are not part of the hospital, but, about ownership, co-management and all that sort of stuff. So I think it would be important to have that hapu engagement about that too.
I think because Heritage New Zealand has a property there in the house, so we understand that importance of having that engagement and that buy-in at that level, and that about the public clearinghouse. We understood from them, and I suppose what my colleagues are trying to express is the social history. It's very important of the history of Waitangi, and that definitely includes the Haukainga. One of our ex-board members was Paul White, and so he was also keen to ensure that it's not just left to flow past us, and that was one way we thought that we could bring in our experience when working with archaeology about this. The history is about actual people and their connection to the whenua and how they used it and how they want it to be remembered.
And because, coming back to the local hapu and of course dealing with Paul White, I think it's important because we know we're feeling that tension every now and then when things clear, but also that you're extending it over to the Urupa as well. So that would be good just to get that. Yeah.
Yep. Next one is, sorry.
Mr. Brassi, you made reference to non-statutory alert layers similar to site significance.
Yeah.
So what does Heritage New Zealand view the role, I just sort of want to get clear up here, view the role of a non-statutory alert layer to raise awareness, you made reference to that, of historical and cultural heritage. And do Heritage New Zealand consider this an effective planning tool under the RMA?
We think it's a first step. It's just the first step to raise that awareness. The issue that we have and facing the council is resourcing to research, to consult, to record, to list these sites. Heritage New Zealand has done 3 new listings in the last 5 years in the Far North. 3. There are some other sites that we will go through shortly where it would take years of research and survey. It would take tens of thousands of dollars to bring that to a point where we can ask for a listing or a scheduling in the district plan. None of us have those resources, unfortunately, at the moment to do that. So we see it as a first step. It's a light touch, acknowledge it's a light touch. But if we know something of value is there, we shouldn't do nothing through the RMA or through our own act. And that's why we will support an elite layer as a non-statutory. It is not perfect, but it's a first step.
To follow on from that, you giving the count, the reference to the size of significance of that layer, have you observed from councils that have implemented the elite layer, have these tools helped to reduce unintentional damage to heritage? You know?
Oh, I do not know. Yeah. I do not know the answer to that. Yeah. I would hope so. That's all I can say, but I don't know. Because this would come out of limbs and things. So, if people applied for a limb, they would see that there was a non-statutory alert layer. So it is something to start raising awareness before, the bulldozer is turned on.
Thank you. Yes, we had a submitter yesterday that made reference in regards to a schedule Māori sites and area of significance and stuff are happening. And so.
And I was probably going to say, I didn't know.
It's good that you make reference to resourcing as well. So there's that potential collaboration here
Yes.
with DZ, council, and
Yes,
third
definitely.
party. And third parties usually also should include landowners.
Yes.
Is there that ability, obviously you say there's no resourcing, I'm making assumptions council may not have resourcing as well, that there could be collaboration for potential projects?
Yeah, we've worked with council over many years doing collaborative projects and also deal with resource consenting issues all the time and have conversations. So look, it's that is not unknown to us. It's familiar ground.
But just remember that the bar to get something listed or even put in the district plan is quite high. From our evidence, research, surveying of boundaries, consultation. It is quite a high bar.
I suppose I like the idea of a non-statutory thing for now, because I know that all medical centres, hospitals are struggling. And it's like farmers who spoke this morning, they've got to do tricks or adapt, is the word they say. Got to adapt. And so hokianga holders really pivotal with limited resourcing. And I don't think they would like that. I can't talk for them. That any kind of heritage layer would prevent them from making
cost or anything.
I don't know, a maternity ward, or something like that.
That's not the intention.
The intention is not that. The intention is just to recognise.
Aye. And why? Because in the council, the old North Tech building across the road is now, that was devolved to the community with no resourcing. And they were trying to run nursing programs out of there so that the nurses could train at the Hokianga Hospital, and that was their way of trying to, keep the hospital staffing
and local skills, local jobs.
all of that. But they had an underdeveloped building.
Yeah.
They had when North Tech pulled out, and here's these queer. He's queer trying to raise funds to make it happen to help the Hokianga Harbour, and here's the council saying you're not meeting building consents.
Yes.
So you know what I mean? It's like this pull-harder cycle.
Yes, so we're not trying to put a barrier or
just how important that is. Yeah.
Yes.
I've got it. No, thank you. That's quite a helpful clarification. So Thank you.
Okay.
Onwards.
Onwards.
Waimati.
Yeah, Waitangi. Okay, well, it's an interesting landscape. This drawing was done in the mid-1830s, and here you can see the church here. Here you can see what's now known as the Tiwaitangi Mission House, London Mission House here. Now, the reason the mission was set up there was, again, my colleague was from Federated Farmers talking about soils, good soils, and they thought this would be a great idea, the missionaries, to establish and teach European farming techniques. And so what we have is basically the beginning of the pastoral industry in New Zealand. This is, in a sense, ground zero of where we kicked off. And you can see here, this is the view looking, the road now runs along here, but you can see the view here, and you can see the fences, and you can see the landscape. The whole reason it's there is, is because of this, which is a korotope, which is the powerhouse pa there. And this is where many of the people lived, and many of the people farmed using methods of Māori horticulture, which they've been doing for many hundreds of years and was producing very good food. Thank you very much. But anyway, the missionaries came in here and decided to introduce this new methodology. This is an archaeological site drawing of the pa. Here you can see these are terraces here and large. There's some pits there. There's also some other bits and pieces. So as archaeologists, we find these drawings very, very useful. They explain what's going on.
So the mission was able to establish under the protection of the local Māori.
So this again shows another view, looking down. Here's the church here. Here's the buildings here. The thing is now we look at this. It's only the church and the Sunday school and this building here, but there was a lot more buildings there. But I think the big thing is this space, and the reason the space is here is because this is, as I say, ground zero of the pastoral industry in New Zealand. This is where it started. So the reason that we have for protecting or extending the zone is really to look after that place.
Landscape.
That landscape. We're about landscapes. And there's where we would like to have it extended to. And really that's about a visual buffer, it's about allowing that place to be remain.
To be clear, Bill, our actual request is smaller than that. So this is the full request with the landowners who have made submissions as well. So the actual full request goes beyond what we want. And we'll support that.
And just one question is there a lot of visual evidence of that initial farming for pa area today? And is there, or is most of it below ground?
No, we are still there, and very visual. You walk on it, it's very clear. And a lot of the landscape values of farming are still there. Those are the King's Paddock, for instance, dates from the period there. They're still there. So
some of the original trees are still there.
Some of the original trees.
Any questions on that?
Other than the council support that?
Yes, exactly.
The council are supporting.
Yeah, so we're supporting.
Yeah.
And so, no, you. Also, just the same old question. And our local hapu mana whenua support this?
I don't know.
I just know of a particular family there that write submissions all the time.
I haven't heard from them back about this, but I don't know how widely that's been supported.
I can't see them disagreeing, I just
can't
think it's important to have.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
I was just going to provide a bit of an additional context because a lot of the rationale for, there were a large number of additional areas or extensions that Heritage New Zealand asked for, and quite a few of them I have not recommended picking up because I wasn't comfortable that the spatial extent of those were clear from the original scope of the submission. This one is different because it wasn't just Heritage New Zealand asking for this, and there was, they had not appeared at this hearing, which is unfortunate, but potentially it's because I have agreed with them. in particular Sinna Smith and Heather Adams and Duncan Ross. And the amount of research and evidence that they put together to support this, it lined up with, it was clearer spatially what they were actually asking for, and put it to John to say, does this stack up? And he agreed with the spatial extent of it, but my approach was this extension ends up being a Part B type overlay. So again, it's, yes, it's an extension, but it is a lighter touch extension, and that it really is managing risks under the ground combined with that colour aspect, unless there is a site that contains a scheduled heritage resource that's already there.
Yeah, so that was sort of the angle that I was wanting to explore with mine. Because I was thinking, what is there above the ground?
There's not much above.
That needs to be protected. You're confirming that we really,
yeah.
Thank you, that's answered that question in my mind.
Yeah, view shafts.
It's the view shafts, really, yeah.
Okay, and the next one. It's just up here, the Waitangi Islands Heritage Overlay Area. This was those islands are listed with us as Waitangi. You did that thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it?
Oh, yeah, briefly, if anybody knew the late Emma Phipps Smith, she was the proposer of the listing of these islands, Multimaire, which was previously a Waiwana, Kuiarongo Uru, the small island in the middle, and Mutuarahi. So she was a passionate supporter of heritage Māori here, Te Ao Māori, and there's a number of listings that we have done with her in this Waitangi Paihia Kororarika area. Islands is one of them. She proposed, because they're so visual and you can see them from all over the place, that she wanted that acknowledgement of her tupuna, te kemara, and their place in Waitangi, to do with Waitangi this place, but the time before Waitangi became Waitangi because of the te tiriti. Yeah, so that was one of the reasons, because she lived over in Kororarika, and the discharge of paru into the bay was also a concern of hers. So she systematically went through acknowledging through our act the heritage, Māori heritage sites of significance through our listing process.
And in our view, yes, they are listed, and yes, they are reserves as well, but we also think that they should be shown in the district plan as being important for anyone looking through the plan. You should still use the plan as another layer to acknowledge the community importance or the social importance of these areas over and above our scheduling or reserve status or dock or whatever, because those reserves have different purposes. We want the acknowledgement for the cultural value here.
Again, I come back to coming back to the mana whenua and Ngāti Kaua, Ngāti Rangi, o konei. And something I heard at a funeral, my sister-in-law's funeral, was that they like to be asked. Yeah. Otherwise it just causes one whoever. Yeah. So
no surprises.
Yeah. And so they want to be asked as mana whenua rather than other people, other Maoris making decisions for them.
Yep. Okay.
That was loud and clear.
Okay.
Yep.
Take it.
Yeah. So when we went through this, Emma proposed it.
That was Emma. I'm just talking about the marae. And Tautuko, because she's from here.
Yeah, she's from here.
But if they don't know, if they don't know, they get mad.
Yeah.
Truly.
So she when she did it, I said, you need the support. So back then it was the kaumata there passed anyway.
Tapiata.
Yeah, Apiata. It was him and Kepa Waiomio and Merehora was aware, Kingi Tauru. They were, she and Eru. She So we've had a long association with the Hokainga here for various things, archaeological authorities, and I said we need to be solid because our process goes to a statutory process, and they want to see the same thing. Who told this?
But I think we acknowledged it, that we should go and see it.
Yeah. And share it.
And share this.
Which brings us on to the next one.
This is very interesting.
Yeah, this is very interesting.
Oh, sorry, that's just the extension.
So this is the Oururu Valley, and we have been working with council and really happy on this. But basically, it's a very large valley, and what happens is you get all this alluvial material washes down from the hills and forms this fantastic growing medium, beautiful soils. And so those soils support a very large population of people. And in the 18th century, there was a map and it recorded 2,000 fighting men, suggesting there was around about 8,000 people in the valley. And there's 57 recorded along the valley, but probably more. And I'll show you where we've done to find some more. And basically, it's one of the most spectacular archaeological landscapes in the country. And so we have concerns that, it really has sat there relatively dormant for a long period of time. And I mean dormant, there's been farming in bits and pieces, and forestry, but it's starting to change, it's starting to accelerate. And we want to make sure that this very, very important, I would say, not just nationally, but internationally, important archaeological landscape is preserved. So we just want to bring this to your attention.
So this is the valley that runs inland from Taipa.
So,
yeah.
So you've made reference to working with the just who have you been working with?
well, we've been working with Tina.
Yes. Yes, she's been approved by Nina.
I can't say anything.
Yes, there was a joint working going on in this through this valley. Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, they approached us to work together with Bill and
And council or just
Sorry?
they worked with you?
Yes, and council.
And council.
Yeah.
So what you're proposing is sort of like a step back from the hospital.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's
It's a true alert layer.
yeah, and it's like, as you say, it's a signal for research,
Yeah.
understanding, cooperation, collaboration.
Yeah, and just be
With
aware,
the ultimate sort of goal being that
it could become a heritage
could be
overlay
protected
area.
in how and why, and,
Yeah.
that's where, and that sets it up for like.
That's right, correct.
So it's,
You look like you want to ask a question.
No, I've discussed this with Heritage New Zealand in the pre-hearing meeting, so this isn't, I guess, new information to me. And the only thing I probably want to say at this point is that I don't think either John or I are disputing the potential importance of this valley. That's not the reason why I haven't picked up what the initial submission was, which was a heritage area overlay. That was more about, again, not having spatial clarity in the original submission as to how big, how much land, what got picked up.
Yeah.
Combined with the fact that I know there's a lot of mahi going on through other processes and it's very much iwi and hapu driven. And I wasn't comfortable that this particular PDP process was the forum to start introducing heritage area overlay rules at that point.
yeah, we accept that, we're not at that point.
Yeah, so it sits there as this alert layer.
Yes.
Thing.
A raising awareness layer. Yeah.
And as you're probably aware, Mr. Chair, in my 42A report, I haven't made a specific recommendation with respect to alert layers, predominantly because I knew that there was going to be no evidence on them until this hearing.
The spatial extent is clear in your mind about
What we've done to go through a bit more Sorry, Peter?
Yeah, because these little stars here are archaeological sites. And what it shows is a number of archaeological sites. These are the stars here. But what it fails to record is there's a number of past sites that aren't even recorded in this data set. And what we did is we just virtually did a drive around and found some more past sites than hadn't been recorded. Example. But the other thing is we also used LiDAR, which is access to public use of LiDAR through NRC. And what we've done is we've done a bit of shading and a bit of examination. Here we can see this past site here, because you can't really see it because either it's on private land or over the bush. But what we are doing is we're picking up more and more by using using other methods basically. So what we're finding out is this valley is a really complex system. Of course, the story of the valley is that you could start at one part and call to the next, way down to the sea. So, and it certainly shows that we need data.
Kia ora, thank you. I've had a little bit of awareness of Rudu Valley and the processes that have been undertaken at the council. So I get your, we see the role of an alert layer just being raising awareness. There's something here, we don't know what's here. However, as you said, you've driven around, identified areas, and these are on private property, would that be correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so raising an alert layer or having an extent of an alert layer and a private property landowner, which we've heard from yesterday, these layers are across my property, big concerns, no communication. So I think I get it, make awareness of the heritage values, the cultural values, the social values, I get that. But ideally, from a council perspective, I don't know if they've got the resourcing to communicate these things. So, sorry, my point I'm making is, yes, data, LiDAR, reports, whatever, is a start to things. However, what goes in hand, in particular on private property, I'll go from a cultural values perspective, you raise a lot of red flags and challenges, and who's there to address those challenges, I suppose. Something that comes to my mind as a risk, and you get the pushback of, well, not here. So I get the alert, and that's why I think I sort of asked you guys that question, what you see the role of an alert layer is, but what goes alongside that, communications, what are the parallel processes, and who's in that parallel process in particular.
But I think that, from a planning point of view, we have followed the process. We have lodged submissions. We have given indications of what we're talking about. We have done further submissions on things we didn't like or didn't like. Does the landowners have responsibilities as well to do that process? To have a look at submissions, to lodge submissions that they're against, because we haven't seen anything against these, lodged against these. There have some been lodged against some of the others. So if we don't get an alert layer now, we're going to be another 10 or 15 years away before we have another opportunity, unless we do a plan change. We say the value is there now, and we're saying awareness needs to be there because we know it has been compromised now. And we are saying because of ignorance, mainly.
Can I just say something? In the years that I've worked in this role, another role that I had was working with the archaeological authority. And part of one of the key protective measures in our act is to protect archaeology. How I see it is if you had an alert layer, at least they get a heads up that there's something on their property. Because regardless of whether there's an alert layer or not, they are all bound to apply for an authority under our act. And if they do it, knowing that it's sea like cut through the power supply and someone reports them, because inevitably someone does, and we go acting as a prosecution, or police explain first and then determine. So,
Or the value to be evaluated before we can
the
record them.
value of having an alert layer maybe as a heads up to landowners. Doesn't mean they have to like it, but at least they've got a tool.
Because we're not adding anything to what the law says, Mr. They are meant to get authorities. Are they aware of it, what they're about to do?
Yeah, because of the layer.
Triggers a need for an authority.
Yeah, I think what Commissioner Walker was really saying, we've had evidence like this before. This is the thin edge of the wedge, and ultimately you will take my land and tell me what I can do or not do on my land, and we're struggling as it is. We heard evidence yesterday about who does it devalue the property, what add value the property. We've heard competing perspectives on that one. I'm not saying that's my view, but that's the evidence we've heard. And I think what Sally was saying is she suspects that that's possibly going to be the way it is interpreted by a number of landowners. And how do you manage that?
I'll just go back to, we've both got our own acts. We're working under this. Yes. Our act that says we need to advocate and protect, and your act says you need to protect as a matter of significance. There are appeal rights.
Well, I think you come from an important start point, which is these acts are already in place. These duties are already there. We're just letting you know. That's what I'm hearing from you. Because the Heritage New Zealand Act is there.
Yep.
There are duties and obligations that you must recognise, whether you're aware of them or not.
And we're acknowledging we're acknowledging that people may not be aware of them.
Correct. So I suppose the corollary of your argument is, as I sort of played out in my head, is that an alert layer is an information layer. Yes, to make people aware of the duties and obligations that are potentially already in place. And they may not be aware of.
That's correct. If we go to the next. So when we drew that, for example, that is not following property boundaries. It is following contours. So we've gone to the contour that is just over the ridge on both sides of the valley. So it's not a property based. It is contours where you are likely to find those values that we're talking about.
Yeah, because the thing is, I mean, when these sites were made, they weren't property. The property boundaries weren't the same, and I think that we get caught up with the property boundaries. And I think we've got to look at a much wider level about how the landscape is and how people are using the landscape, and that map reflects how people are using the landscape. So I guess that's why we always have this tension between two systems.
Just another quick question. Sure. Does Heritage NZ have stats on authorities to modify, and do you know if there are any in that particular valley? Or because I know you've got forestry there as well.
Yeah,
as you said.
We have had.
We could come back with you and give those to you. You can add those up.
Yeah.
And we'll send them through to AK.
I understand the context, thank you, of what is happening, because yes, I have heard that conversation of, well, this is happening, that's happening, forestry, it's X, Y, Z, so it'd be good to know.
So yeah, we can provide those.
And just to add, I'm sort of happy to allow that to happen, but please have to us before the council's right to apply, because what we would like to do as the council officers is weird.
Today.
So how long do you think you, how long?
Written protocol.
Oh, written, okay, right, yeah, okay, yes, no, we can do it within that time frame. Is that, what's that time?
10 days.
Oh, yeah,
But there may be a discussion about what that date is for this.
so we can get in the next couple of days.
That's wonderful, thank you. Yeah. All I'm saying is that for it to be of any real value to us, it should be linked to the council officers prior to the election.
And I'd like to add that I think there's an important part 2 of the Waitangi tribunal case coming from Ngāti Kahu, Y45.
Yes.
And I suspect that Ngāti Kahu I think they've trained maybe 2 archaeologists.
Yes.
And so I don't know when those claims are being held, but if you look at the number Y45, it's an old one. So it's the unfinished part of the Muri Whenua claim, and Ngāti Kahu are the only iwi in the far north who have not settled. So
yeah.
I don't know enough, but I would know that that they would have had these archaeologists trained to locate these sites to probably substantiate something. I don't know. I'm not. Yeah. So again, I come back to I accept that Ngāti Kahu have requested this kind of cover or whatever.
Okay.
So yeah, I just sort of wanted to put that one in there, that the Y45 case is coming up, I don't know when. It should be in the next year, given the number of submissions that are happening. But I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you. I guess this is
Just before we move on to this one and off the valley, can we cut round back to the council team just on the spatial extent? Because we've seen what you put forward, and Mr. Brown's report has a little bit of a different spatial extent, and I just wouldn't mind exploring that a bit further.
I might start off first before Mr. Brown, if that's all right. And we could go back to the previous slide with that extent. So just in the timelines of when this map had come to me, the original submission did not include a map.
Yeah.
The follow-up information provided in December 2024 included a map, but it was a generic oval over the valley. And then this iteration has only been prepared as part of the HNZ evidence last Thursday.
Yes.
So I'll let John speak to the difference potentially between this layer and the layer in the original report, but just that's at which stage people would ever have got to see a line on a map saying this is actually what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. The Plan House has actually looked at the area with a report which was went to Section 32, because I think I wish it was Section 32 material. And we followed a similar process in terms of looking at topography and understanding the deposition of archaeological sites as recorded. What I would say is that there will be areas of difference based on the fact that HNZ have done this additional work to start, and also looking at the lower Dutch, which is something we didn't have access to. So that's probably why there are variations, but it's broadly comparable.
It's pretty close, yeah. Okay, that's helpful to know. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next one. Is everyone all right with this?
Let's get going.
Yeah, I have a tendency to fly through things, so I'm very pleased to stop with me. So, this is an example, I guess, where heritage. A lot of people see heritage as independent, but actually heritage, I think, is non-independent. I see it as the opposite. Maybe that's a philosophical way that we view it. But here's an example of the Hundavasa toilets in Kamakura. And I think as a result of what happened there in 1999, there's the face of Kalakaua is changing, and it's reflected by some of the buildings there. Also, some of the council buildings, which have been, what a good word, hunderlust. And but also of course, it's one of the few towns in, well, it's the only town in Auckland that I know has got a railway line through it. Does anyone know if there's any other towns that has a railway line running through the main street?
Hastings. Hastings might be similar.
Yeah, but anyway, it's extremely rare, and I think we need to acknowledge that. Plus, there's a proliferation of buildings such as the Star Hotel and the cinema and other buildings which are sometimes listed as scheduled buildings. So what we're saying is that Kalakaua should really be recognised for its heritage values, including the coal mine and the railway station. And so what we're proposing is an area around Kalakaua that encapsulates some of those heritage features.
And we haven't settled on an actual map yet. We would like to work further with council on it, if it's acceptable to this approach, to try and redefine this better. Whether it's in this process or not.
So the next,
oh, sorry.
I think it might be helpful clarification because it was a question that I had when I saw this evidences. I'm not clear whether I'm seeing two different options for a spatial extent of an alert layer, or whether I'm looking at two different options for a heritage area overlay versus an alert layer. The purple sort of, it's not hatching, shading.
Yeah.
Under the national planning standards, it's an option. It's a tool in the toolbox to kind of do spatial extents around, whereas the actual, to do spatial extents around scheduled heritage items, whereas the thick purple line is the boundary that you would use for a heritage area, which is why the PDP doesn't use shade, it just uses a line. And I know that's been difficult for some submitters to sort of see, well, there's a line, but am I in it, am I out of it? And unfortunately, we were restricted by the mapping direction from the national planning standards, but I really appreciate some clarity as to what I'm looking at for this.
A little bit of both options here because we're not quite sure what is the best one.
What was in your primary submission?
That'd be heritage overlay area.
But you didn't provide a map.
No.
Yeah, and this is where I think we've got a bit of a natural justice potential issue is if we do, you can take a submission that was very broadly worded.
Yeah.
And then next minute, you have a heritage overlay, and past the further submission stage. The question is, how do other people in Kalakaua or other interested parties have comment on where that layer is applied or whether you, I suppose people have the opportunity to put in a further submission that says, here's our opinion on a heritage protection mechanism in Kalakaua. Do we get any of those?
I don't think there were any further submissions specifically on Kalakaua.
That doesn't mean people are completely supportive.
No.
Because they really don't pay attention, potentially, until someone shows them a line on a plan. And there is an obvious natural justice issue that we will address. Now, the question then may be how far back can we step, but still acknowledge your desire to recognise heritage, and that's possibly where this alert layer might lie. I haven't formed a final view on that. I'm just trying to round the issue.
Yeah, we accept that.
And I assume council officers have a similar concern.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Definitely have a similar concern, and I am at the same position as you, Mr. Chair, in that I haven't formed an opinion yet on the heritage alert layer, but I will, within my reply today, provide some initial thoughts on that.
There's more to come, I would suggest. Okay, carry on.
Okay. Thank you.
We're just wanting to acknowledge that these are the things that we're going to have to wrestle with.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding,
And we're not
we're
surprised.
more happy to hear this evening.
We're not surprised.
We're not surprised. Our job is to be advocates.
Yeah. Yes.
So this is Kyle, and this is a heritage alert area. And of course, as you drive into the town, you see the big park just next to the police station there, and all the lands around it were cultivated. Here we can see the mission station. This is here. This is the Wesleyan one, and that's where the cemetery is today. This is an early map which shows not only the position of where the mission station was on the map, but really importantly, this line here, it's a bit hard to make out, but it's called Arahuela, Soldiers Road. And this was the so-called Bromley Road. This was built built by the soldiers, the Marines, from the HMS Dromedy in 1819, and it pretty well goes to the hospital, relatively close to that road that goes up to the hospital. And there it goes there, and that's New Zealand's oldest wheeled road because they used bullocks, which eventually ended up in the mission station of the carrying logs down to the river. So there's some.
That's the birth of EZTN.
Yeah.
No, it's an excellent.
This here is a cairn which marks the site of the mission, and you can see the power there. And you always note with these early mission stations the relationship between power and mission. And of course the council owns, this was a recent listing of a building here. This is the old post office which is now used as a library, which is owned by the council. And we also just want to acknowledge the event that happened at another listed building. This is Category 2 building, Soldiers Memorial Car, and it was 100 years old. And we had Cindy Cole there as well.
House kitchen.
Governor General, and there's an area which sort of marks out those principal features. Now this, yep.
Back. Yeah. Okay. The same issues are coming up with using an alert layer. We accept that a heritage area is not appropriate, but should there be an alert layer to again recognise and raise awareness of the historic value for a long time in this area.
This is the last one, and probably really quite important. This we're sitting here at the moment is the proposed Waitangi Heritage Overlay in a special purpose zone. Now the plan at the moment doesn't recognise that Waitangi is a significant sacred and ancestral landscape. It doesn't. We do have the treaty house listed, but it's one of the country's oldest surviving place. And Waitangi is the main place of contact between Māori and the British Crown, and it was leading up in 1940. And as you well know, there's been some very significant events here. The raising of the colour. Yeah. So this is what happened. It was a meeting place at Northern Rangatira. First national flag was flown here. Declaration of Independence. Treaty took place here. And there's ongoing national celebrations for Waitangi. And it's New Zealand's first and only national landmark site. It's the highest recommendation of any place in the nation as in our act nationally. So what we're saying is Waitangi and its surroundings need to be acknowledged and protected in the district plan, which is not at the moment. It's down as rural production land, which I think we consider the significance of this place, of which we will acknowledge it should be a bit more than rural production land. And just to give you an idea of the we just recently did a little hikoi for 3 or 4 days.
Last week.
Last week.
Oh, around here.
Around here, yeah, archaeologists, just to see what we could find. And of course, this is Waitangi where we are here, and there's been lots of people walking around here, and you think, oh, we know everything about it, but we don't, because we know. See this little place here? This is a little island, and in that little island, there's a whole lot of stone features associated with Māori horticulture. There's a stone wall, which is Māori, which is about 40 metres long, that runs along there. There's a whole lot of stone features in there, which are to do with gardening. That's right on the golf course, around about the 18th tee or whatever you want to call it. There's all this amazing stuff here. This area here, which is we now know as the golf club, was known as Cactus Camp. This was the main control centre for defence of Northland. It was called the Box, and basically the idea was the Japanese would come into the Bay of Islands and they'd be boxed in. And so this had to be protected, and when we wandered around we found slit trenches here, machine gun trenches here and here, which we didn't know about, and are still there up in the hills surrounding Weaverall Bay. We then walked down here and walked up here. It's pretty clear, but when you come down these ridges, you can see a ridge here, you can see a ridge there, you can see a ridge there, a ridge there, and a ridge there. This is effectively State Highway 1. This is where people are going up till they reach the falls, and then they're walking up into the Taimai where all the food is. And on each one of these ridges, there's pits for storing of kumara, there's terraces, and there's also scarps to defend them. This area here, as a landscape, is a remarkable landscape that needs to be looked after for future generations. And our collective sort of wisdom should be that it should be marked in the district plan.
So we've worked with the Waitangi National Trust and their submission on a special zone for this, and we're supportive of that. If that doesn't work, we still go back to a heritage area needed for this.
So have you had a chat to the, so obviously you're aware of the special zone?
Yes, yeah, we
understand that
closely
is proceeding well.
Yes.
And they're engaging with the council officers.
We've got a meeting this afternoon.
Oh, so you're going to be a part of that? Okay, so that was my question.
Yeah.
So what, so if the special purpose zone succeeds, would there need to be?
No.
So you're wanting to keep this as a not being?
So yes, so we'd rather, our submission still lies there, but we support the special zone if it can be worked through,
Right, okay.
which we are part of.
Yeah, you want to ask a question?
No, just to confirm, particularly as part of Minute 14, obviously these processes enable us to facilitate in what we need, I guess, to best assess these applications for special purpose zone. Officers, including Ms. Morgan here, have been in discussions bringing the parties together amongst other parties who need to be in that conversation as well, to ensure that we've got good information to make a well-informed and robust recommendation to the panel when the time comes in 15A.
15B.
15B.
Well, that's really good. I mean, we saw this coming way back at hearing before and really encouraged this process. I think this is an example of really coming into fruition. I mean, I think what would be helpful would be when the National Trust turn up to get their evidence in hearing B, they acknowledge you, and if they support your, if not then, option as well, then that would
we will attend that hearing as well.
Complete the circle, I think.
As well as mana whenua.
Yes,
exactly. As well as
This has been part of the direction through the chair of those discussions.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. We've seen nothing but encouraging signs today. Yeah, that's great. Ms. Pearson?
I was just going to clarify that procedurally the way for Heritage New Zealand to clearly be a part of that hearing 15B process is my recommendation to defer their submission point about the heritage area overlay to that hearing, just so it could be considered together and make it really clear that Heritage New Zealand have got standing to appear for that hearing.
So that's right. Well, there's the option of the Waitangi Trust bringing Heritage New Zealand as a witness.
That's right.
That's the other option.
Yeah, they have standing, Mr. Chair, as a further submission.
Oh, you've got
That's part of
there we
it.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We look forward to seeing you all in the same room at the 15 about things. Anything else?
No, just the same old. As long as the locals know, because boy, they get mad. And it doesn't matter that a decision was made 10 years ago, they'll keep saying, or yesterday, they'll say, we didn't know about it. That makes them mad.
Yep.
That's
taking that off.
often people, a lack of consultation is often the feeling of angst that comes from that is often exponentially higher than the actual.
Yeah, it's very hard to come back from it.
Than the effect. What we're arguing about, well, the argument is the fact that you need to
Yeah, it's not about what you're doing. Yeah.
And so that's a lesson learned a lot. Okay, is that the conclusion?
That's the conclusion, yeah.
We would just like to thank all the support from James and his team. The ability to talk to the staff and have meetings with the staff has been really good for us to work through and to work out what we need to focus on, because our submission was a lot wider. So that's been really valuable, and we thank, and John's really, his input as well has been really useful for our guys to focus on what we want to. So we thank them.
Yeah, thank you. And we acknowledge that. I mean, it's been sort of de facto expert conferencing without having to mandate it.
Yeah.
And it's worked really well, and it's quite happy by that. Mr. Mandela, have you finished?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Mandela?
I noticed that they haven't skipped play here.
Oh, so you're saying, well, are you asking me
Well,
a
they've gone
question?
over all the other heritage areas that they can stem with, but there's no mention of the play here.
So with the Pahia one, we have restricted our interest into just adding the islands in off the shore, and we are making no further comment on the Pahia overlay.
Did you hear that answer?
Thank you.
Mandela? Well, thank you for clarifying that.
So what does that mean? What?
So we asked for some additional areas in Pahia, but we're not pursuing those.
Ah.
Yeah.
I think that's what Mr. Mandela wanted to hear.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
So thank you waiting patiently to hear that. Okay, is there anything else anybody wants to bring up now before we adjourn for lunch? I'm going
I still want clarification because we had lots of things yesterday, yesterday. It's off the table?
The additional ones are off the table in Pahia, yes. Only the islands been added now.
I heard that, but I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
I would just like some clarification and potentially along the lines of Mr. Mandino, given that Rotorua has been one of the more contentious overlays, and it was a Heritage New Zealand submission to remove the southeast portion, which was reflected in the section 42A, whether or not they had any further comment on what is there to be remain.
I disagree with the fact that you hadn't put it in your presentation, was that you had nothing further to say, but let's
we're not pursuing
reiterate
that.
and underline it.
Yeah, we're not pursuing that any further. The main issue with the stone fields with a general rule rather than that particular overlay. So we're not pursuing that.
Okay, so
Sorry, I'm a bit slow. So, is that the poet farm was talking about?
Correct.
Off the table.
is off the table a correct way to summarise that?
She wants clarification.
I think there's a couple of parts to it. So the Heritage New Zealand submission was just remove the southeast portion. Their original submission supported retaining the northeast portion, which is the farm that is the subject of the Chapman Smith's opposition. And so I guess my question was, given that there has been a lot of requests to pull it back to the original precinct boundaries as notified, as in the ODP, whether they had any position, obviously the 42A report recommended keeping that northeastern portion, and whether by saying, having no further comment, that just means that they support my 42A recommendation for the boundary. Because I guess it's not that they were asking for anything else, but they were supporting keeping that north.
Can we have a talk about that over lunch and come back straight after lunch?
Well, we were going to allow council officers to have a good think about their response to us. So we've got.
Mr. Chair, look, if it's a discrete matter, I think it's possibly helpful to just, I don't think it's going to disrupt the flow of proceedings after lunch.
It would only take a second.
It may be helpful
I
to
was
look
going
at
to
the
say, if you
map.
just, I mean,
Or you could just tell.
I was just going to say, if we could just give you like 2 or 3 minutes now.
Yes.
We'll have a quick little break. You can come back.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
So we'll call it a 5-minute adjournment. And just somebody just nod at me when you've read it.
Yes.
You do.
Yep.
Yes.
Recording is still going.
Clear. Okay, we're re-adjourning. Thank you very much. Who's going to update us? Who's passed us that?
Oh, we'll go back to Heritage New Zealand.
Okay, Heritage New Zealand, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Well, we had a discussion with the council planning officer and experts, and we all agreed that we should revert back.
Oh,
But we would support reverting back to what was in the notified. What is the original boundaries?
And just to give you a bit of idea how those original boundaries came about, because it's important to understand the process, 30 years ago, with the Aiken Chalice and so forth. So what happened is the Stonefield site is incredibly important. It's the largest intact Stonefield site in Eastern Polynesia, Māori. And so it just reflects how important this place was. And so there was a large project that was done, an archaeological project in the 90s with a guy called Doug Sutton. And he employed some archaeological mappers called Megabee and Morgan. And they mapped it all and they drew where all these sites were. And then aerial photographs were used to kind of look around where those sites were on the ground, and there was consultation with the landowners. I assume time to be on, but I'm only assuming. And that's what was drawn up. And so that really contains the very visible remains, the core of that area. So it needs to be protected.
And we're happy with the operative plan.
Which is?
Yeah, so just to make it absolutely clear for those people in the room.
Yes.
What is that?
I think we'll just say 2022.
Just to make sure.
To be very clear, it is the operative Porirua Heritage Precinct. It's from the operative district plan, where the only extent of it with respect to the Chapman Smith farm is the 2 fingers extending out into the farm, which, as we heard in evidence yesterday, covers 6% of their farm.
Okay, so you heard that?
Yes.
Everybody?
So yes, so we're going back to that.
So that's the dotted line on this.
That's the dotted.
So the dotted line was one is the, I believe, is the operative plan, and then the else.
Yes, it is going back to the dotted line.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Somebody want to report the
Mr. Chair, maybe we can discuss with.
Look, it seems okay. Particularly what we've heard from the parties is the general agreement. We go back to the operative plan.
Yeah.
That
The youth precinct is the operative plan.
we still have to, we still have to consider, but my reasoning for asking the question is that Heritage New Zealand was the only remaining submitter in this process that was supporting retention of the northwestern corner. So my purpose of that discussion just then was to understand, would they still consider including that area important, or would they also consider pulling it back to the operative line would also be acceptable? So now I understand their position on it.
Yes.
And so that's what we'll be discussing.
And I'm not asking for council's position, I'm just asking what the Heritage New Zealand agreed.
Yes.
Yeah. So that, do you agree
in the
with that
northeast, we
summary?
agree to pull it back to the.
Did you agree with that summary?
Yes.
Okay, right. So we're going to adjourn it here.
And the other one was Pai.
I will confirm the pie here.
Okay.
We don't need to reconfirm that.
Okay.
So, okay, very good. So look, we are going to adjourn for lunch. We just need to go through a little bit of housekeeping and just how we're going to manage the next phase. I think we still need a good hour for lunch. Obviously, I'm in your hands as to how much time you need. I want to see you guys, I want to see you all have a good break and have a good meal. And so I want you to allow enough time for that, but also enough time to think and respond.
Yeah, look, as usual for the process that I promote to the panel is that we like to hear what's on the forefront of your mind first, rather than having 2 conversations, and then we will perhaps put to you questions that we think you might want answers for example. I'm thinking maybe an hour and a half
Yeah, that's good. I think we've sort of set a pretty clear direction as to what things we want to be thinking. Unless anybody else wants to add anything.
I just want to confirm that, obviously.
So shall we recommend a one half hour?
Sorry, no, the time we will take to go through is.
Oh, I see.
So I think maybe an hour is probably sufficient.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, to have a break, yeah.
So we'll come back at 2:30, 1:30 now, and we'll go for another one and a half hours.
The meeting we have scheduled with the Waitangi Trust is scheduled for 3:30, so that will work in with that timetable, with not much breathing.
Jolly, okay.
We'll see how we go with it.
And thank you very much. We're adjourned until then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.